try to tell ourselves that we don't really need it anymore. As if $1 million or the bottom of a bottle or a car, I never cheated it before. So you started with the I don't need it, all I need is money. You can give it to me, but you never get it from me.
Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our special guest for this evening. Please make him feel welcome. If you can, let's give him a standing ovation on your feet. Put your hands together all the way from Washington, D.C., all the way from the US of A. We have the one and only Oddisee! Assalamu alaikum. Yes, sit right there. Yes. You may hear people here in Sydney talk about the traditional name of where we are. We are on the Wangal clans of the Gadigal Nation, and this land is the land of the Gadigal people. First question, how important is it to you to acknowledge the land that you're on?
Deeply important to acknowledge the land that you're on. You can't erase somebody's history. You know, there were people here before, and these people matter, and they need to be recognized. And if you don't recognize them, when history repeats itself, and we'll continue to go and invade other spaces, and it doesn't even necessarily have to be something tangible. It could be the invasion of an idea that is appropriated without acknowledging where that idea came from. So acknowledgement is everything.
Thank you. Yes, so please, I hope you do that while you're here on your tour in Australia too, as you're traveling around. I'd also like to acknowledge any First Nations people who are with us tonight. We have a special guest with us. Kobe D's in the house, who'll be performing here on Saturday night. And we look forward to seeing you. Thank you for all your wonderful music, brother, and your lyrics and your stories and your messages. Keep them coming. The realist. I'd like to start by telling us about your tour to Australia. You've been here a lot of times. Maybe talk about some of your memories you've had while visiting here and some of the people involved in bringing you, who've been able to connect you with your audiences here.
Oh, man, as we say in D.C., I've been here a rack of times. First memory I had here, I get out of the airport, it's 2006, and cab driver taking me to my hotel, and I'm like, hey, let me ask you something. Where the black people at? He was like, oh, they in Blacktown. You don't want to go out there. I was like, y'all got Blacktown? Like, you can't, like, what? It's like a Chinatown, but for black people? Like, he's like, nah, it was named that before they got there. I was like, so y'all just, it was premeditated? So that was my first exposure. First time I came out here, but it's been all love, man. The people that I've encountered through the creative space, I will always make that distinguishment. We as artists tend to romanticize, especially people of color, when we travel abroad, how we were treated, and we bring those stories back home, and we paint this farce on how the average person is treated. For example, you know, anyone who went to France during World War II, Josephine Baker's Quincy Jones posts that. As an artist, you get this privilege that the everyday person doesn't get, right? So my experiences here have been through the lens of being an artist and not just an everyday working man here. But they've been a good one. You know, shout out to my man Sam Dutch from the beginning, who's been bringing me out here from the longest, man. Yeah.
Well, identity and music is the theme tonight, and you're not, your background is not unique, but it is an experience for many. Your father is from Sudan.
That's correct.
And your mother is African American.
Yeah.
What was that like for you growing up, and how has it shaped you and your music?
Yeah, I mean, everybody has a reason why they're in therapy, right? So, you know, my mother is from Southeast Washington D.C. For those who don't know, you know, about that area, D.C. and the surrounding areas are home to the wealthiest population of black people in the United States of America, but also home to the largest economic gap between rich and poor, right? So it's like this extreme wealth and extreme poverty, and my mother's from the extreme poverty side, right? And my father, I would say that he is a product of the brain drain of Sudan, the Sudanese who got to leave on student visas. And my father was educated in England, right? And was just a knucklehead, right? And just every way he could find to ruin his father's prospects on him being a great human being, he did it, right? He did things his own way. So He left Sudan, went to Dubai, didn't like banking there with his brothers, hopped on a flight to New York. His homie he went to school with in Sudan told him it's popping in D.C. It's less minority competition. Look that up if you don't know what minority competition is. And he made a life for himself in the District of Columbia, where he met my mother in a club. And I am a very, very happy accident. You know, I'm an accident, simple as that. The photos of my mother and father getting married, my mother's pregnant with me, right? And, you know, my father tried to stick it out, but too many cultural differences between the two of them. So by the age of 3, they divorced. And it was my grandmother, Hajazena, rest in peace, who told my dad, like, you need to take your son. It doesn't matter what the circumstances is, you need to raise your son. He's your son, he's us, you take him. And that was probably a very tough decision for my mother, but as I said, my mother came from extreme poverty and is the oldest of 11 children. And my father was doing much better off when they split from each other. So that started me having a life of living with my father, being raised by him Monday through Friday and seeing my mother on weekends. And that's how I grew up. And I spent my summers in Sudan from age 6 to 18 every summer. And a lot of cultural clashes, a lot of realizations. To sum it up, we would go to pray in the mosque on Friday, and my father would drop me off at my mother's, and before he would tell me that there is only one God and Prophet Muhammad is his prophet, and then I'd go to my mother, and on Sunday before I go home, my mother would take me to church and say, if you don't accept Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, you're going to burn in hell. And that was my life, right?
And why do you think that is? It's so it is a common story that I hear about where there's this weird separation between Africans from Africa and African Americans. Yet we look very similar, and there's this weird disconnect. Even when I was in New York many years ago, that's the first time that I had experienced, and I thought, oh, we're all gonna because here Black people see each other, we're like, yeah, excited, but it's very different. Can you talk to us a little bit about why that is, if you've got any perspective around it?
Absolutely, because for me, it's not weird at all. You know, I think race relations in the States have, for decades now, shaped how other minorities fight their struggles in other countries. And I say that sometimes for better and for worse, because it kind of amalgamates the lens of everybody's problems through the lenses of how race is viewed in the United States. And in the United States, you're dealing with a people who were exported there against their will and had been a part of the creation of the country from its inception and have had no credit for it and everything that comes with that. And I, with my own eyes and my own life, have experienced the comfort that white Americans have with even something as employing Africans over African Americans. It's an unspoken herd that they will feel more comfortable with a person they know that they didn't enslave. Simple as that. You can't have an animosity for me because I didn't technically do anything to you, but you might have a problem with me. And that is something that's real, and we are gaslit to say that it's not true, right? And race is a very, very different thing. I think what I notice in America is once you move there, or when you leave your own home country, the things that you take for granted when you meet another countryman or someone who looks remotely similar to you abroad, you start to congregate and you create this community based off of your commonality and your similarities. But you take those things for granted. For instance, in Sudan, you're not going to walk past every Sudanese person you see and say hello. But if you see a Sudanese person here, you're going to say hello. So why would a Black American see you and immediately say, sister? You know what I mean? Like, that's where I'm from. Like, you just another person, right? And I think the smaller that community gets, the more you can't just take that for granted, and you must go through great lengths to create and foster that community, where a lot of that is lost in the States. My wife is Moroccan, and my wife is born and raised in Paris. And Moroccans don't just walk past everyone and say hello. There's so many of them. Why would you? You know?
I think that's something that's definitely similar and relatable here to blackfellas, to First Nations people here, where there's immigration nation, pretty much. There's actually a film called Immigration Nation. You should check it out. And it's a very similar thing where, someone like myself and many people in this room, it's a very multicultural country, and I think we love that. We celebrate all this multiculturalism, but yet it's like, don't forget whose country it is, don't forget whose land you're on, don't forget how this came to be, how we came to be. And when you spoke about that piece about, I'd rather talk to the person I didn't enslave or I didn't harm than you, it's the first time I've heard it like that, actually.
I like to simplify things. It ain't that complicated.
And earlier on you spoke about the minority something.
Minority competition.
Yeah, what's that? Tell us about it.
So minority competition is when waves of immigration come from different countries where they become minorities in a majority country, whatever the pre-existing ethnicity that's dominant is. There are only a limited amount of jobs and resources that said minority can fulfill. So what tends to happen is the first wave of minorities who arrive want to gatekeep those resources for themselves and feel threatened by other minorities who are trying to achieve the same dreams and possibilities that they have. For instance, in the States, the Irish were very much threatened by African Americans who were moving north because they thought that they would, quote unquote, take their jobs. But the Irish themselves were a minority scared of other minorities. You get Brexit, for an example. The amount of minorities who voted for Brexit to stop immigration when they themselves were immigrants was because I got in. I don't want you to come in and then take my job and mess up things for me. So that's minority competition. There's only but so much that the majority will have available for minorities, so you fight amongst yourselves for the scraps.
Yeah, and that's something we've got to keep in mind when we're doing things, going on about our daily business, and the little minor aggressions we show to other people who are maybe not like us. I think that's something to keep in mind, that it comes from somewhere. You're a family man. How do you do what you do? You travel the world. You're a full-time musician. How do you do what you do without being dependent on the system?
Can I ask you, what's the system?
The system, the white supremacist system, if we're just going to go straight there. The system, the capitalist system, the system that's got us all getting up every day to grind and rewind and get on with it, which is very important. I'm not against making a living for ourselves, but just this system, because I know being an artist and being a musician, it's not depending on who you are and how major you are, but
I think I'd have to answer that question in two parts, because yes, I do have the privilege to work for myself, and I have been for many years. I make a living. I support my family in literally a village, from my music. But I haven't escaped any sort of a system. The world is a very, very big place, and I've been touring for almost 20 years, and I've been touring the exact same countries for almost 20 years. Why is that? I'm doing my first show in Johannesburg in 20 years of touring in a couple weeks. I tour Western countries. I tour white spaces. I'm no exception. I'm in a system. I'm dependent on the euro and the dollar that comes from Canada, US, Australia, New Zealand, and all through Europe. So I'm still in a system. Black people only make up 13% of the population in the United States. The United States is my #1 market for sales. And if it's only 13% of us that's buying my music, I wouldn't be able to make a living. So the majority of people that are buying my music in the States are themselves also white. That's just capitalism,
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's something that we often talk about, for those of us who are like overly conscious and, want to fight the system and get out the system and, all these things that make us excited, but we just can't do it, as you mentioned. And I think, it kind of comes from there. Like, is that possible?
I mean, I speak my truth in my music. I don't have to sugarcoat anything. I have no one above me that can veto my decisions. That's a blessing, right? So I can make a living and also maintain my integrity. That is something that many people can't do. They don't have that privilege to do. There's a hierarchy that they have to silence themselves for. Now, how much of a living I can make, there's definitely a ceiling on that depending on your beliefs. And my beliefs have definitely kept me from entering other spaces, albeit voluntarily. I'm not interested in them. But depending on what you want from the system is depending on what you have to compromise and give up. And I feel as though the niche that I've carved out for myself is giving me a good balance on creating art that I want to create and that people can connect to, but also being conscious that I got to make money. And that's not something that, maybe it's because I am American. It's also from having an immigrant background and looking at capitalism from the outside in. That is a very fundamental difference, and that will probably be the thing that sums up my privilege to the most is I was given the gift to look at capitalism from the outside in. You know, every culture around the world is born into some sort of social construct, whether it's your language, the land that you're from, your ethnicity. But Black Americans never really had that opportunity to come from some place to America. Even people from the Caribbean, although they came from slavery as well, the fact that they left a place, when they get to a new place, that creates the community. Black Americans are the first people born into capitalism. You know, capitalism was created through Holland, through Western Europe, exported to the United States where it proliferated and it really took form. And the first people who were born into it were Black people. So there's a lack of an ability to see outside of capitalism, whereas anyone else who comes to the United States can exploit it from the outside within. A small example of that is getting a small studio apartment anywhere in the United States, and there'll be 6 men living in this place, and each of them will be working medial jobs, saving up money, and then eventually one of them will be able to buy a home, and then another one, and then another one. Within 5 to 10 years, they're all married and homeowners because of the ability to put everything into just living very, very uncomfortably for long periods of time, which is completely shunned upon in America. You're supposed to get out when you're 18. You're supposed to have a job. You're supposed to have money. Where's your car? A woman won't even date you half the time if you don't have those things, right? So that's the ability to exploit the system from the outside in, you know? And I think that's the biggest thing that I've been given as far as playing the system. I do plenty of work that's corporate all the time. A good portion of my living comes from music licensing. I license my music to things that I don't even watch, you know? When I come back from this tour, I'm doing 25 cities from here to England. I'm doing a tour for a company called the City Winery. They're a franchise that owns a series of venues across the United States. Members have this membership where they come and they have wine and they get free performances along with their membership. I don't even drink. The bag is crazy. Yes, I'm gonna go do this for these people while they have Chardonnay. I don't care. I'm gonna go home and take that money. I'm gonna feed a village with that money of other people who don't drink. I'm not getting caught up in I can't do this, because live and let live, you know?
Yeah, I think that's something that challenges some of us a lot, is when we get in those situations where it's like, oh, but this doesn't go with my beliefs and this. Look, I'll be the first to admit it. I was very passionate to that, where nowadays I'm like, it's $1,000 a week to live in Sydney right now, you know? So I think it's, you know, it's okay. Sometimes it's okay if you've got to do that. So long as whatever you're doing has not got blood on its hands, right? You know, it's okay if you have to go and do that. You don't need to always announce it. I mean, you just told us, but I'm sure it's not something that you've announced on.
And I'm announcing it tomorrow, actually. I'm
shame.
announcing it. Yeah.
No shame in the game.
No.
Yeah,
I mean, that's a whole.
Tell us a bit more about that, because it's something that I find that a lot of, you know, people I know are struggling with. We're struggling with this in between, or going when to say no, and, you know, this all of a sudden being cancelled or something because we did something.
Everybody has their own compass, their own moral compass. And when you realize that your moral compass is tailored to you, you can't judge someone else's. You simply cannot. There's no one in this room that can judge my compass, and I can't judge yours, right? That's just how it is. I have my lines that I won't cross, you know, plenty. But those lines for other people are totally fine. You have to be okay with that, you know, and I've built a community of people around me, my family, my friends, my wife, where we share a similar moral compass. So we don't cross those lines collectively. But there are people in outer circles that do, you know, and you just have to be okay with that. Yeah, I mean, there's never been a point in history if you are still an idealist in the way you create art, there's never been a point in history where art and commerce have been separated. There's never been a period. If you look back at some of the greatest Renaissance painters of our time, whose work is what we all want to go see in museums for what it displays and what it defines, we wouldn't know these arts if they weren't commissioned by extremely wealthy families. So there's never really been this separation between art and commerce, whether it be in classical music that gave us the pentatonic scale that eventually turned into jazz when it morphed with West African melodies and harmonies. These things were paid for and these things were subsidized by the wealthy, right? How do you navigate that? When do you put your foot down is completely up to you. I've had plenty of things that I've said no to. I'm trying to remember some off bat. Some like White House situations where I said, nah, I'm good. Some things where it would have been sketchy with the political alliances, nah, I'm good off that. You know, some things where people were trying to just use me often as a poster child to say, well, if he likes us, then we're good, because I'm the poster child for so many things. Being black, Sudanese, Muslim, they're like, yo, please say that you like us so everybody else will. And I'm like, no, I don't hand that card out that easy. You know, so yeah, I have my own compass, but I would encourage anybody to define your moral compass. Don't have it be wishy-washy. Clearly understand what you're okay with and what you're not okay with. Move through life accordingly. And there has never been a separation of art and commerce. It's a myth if you think it has been. And I would love to debate anybody who thinks that there's a point where art was truly for art and, you know, not subsidized by commerce. Yeah.
Well, that might be a good segue into this next question, because you talk a lot about the inequality gap in the communities where you're from and the lack of a real life systematic change when it comes to things like drug abuse, crimes, violence, poverty. I'm sure it's something that some of us want to see change in. Can you talk about the world of music, of the world and the music industries? I guess the glorification and the aestheticization of poverty porn in hip hop, particular, and the negative impacts it can have on our society.
Poverty porn. That's an interesting.
Is that a new one? Yeah, it's it's cool to be poor. It's cool to have a hard life. It's cool. It's in at the moment to we want to hear all the bad stuff that happened to you. Okay. And that's it, you know?
I'm a historian that's what I like to do in my spare time is just read and study. My favorite things to study are human migrations, genetic markers, and flashpoints, points in history that everyone has to remember, right? We all look for things to define our cultures. And when we don't have an abundance of positive stereotypes to define our culture, we will resort to negative stereotypes to result our culture. The roots of black culture go far deeper than, what'd you call it, poverty porn?
Poverty porn.
Poverty porn in hip hop. Let me see if I can sum this up really, really fast, right? You guys can relate to this because we're in Australia. The migration of Europeans that came to the first 13 original colonies of the United States predominantly came from the Midlands of England and northern England, particularly like Scotland, and there were a lot of them were Scots-Irish. If any of you don't know, these people were herders. They were not in industry. They were not agricultural. They were not farmers. So they had this culture, this pastoral culture, being very, very protective over their livestock because livestock was everything to them. And it was based on a culture of honor. You can't steal my livestock or I'll come and fuck you up, right? And they exported that particular culture to the United States in the Appalachian Mountains, especially in the South. The people from New England in the United States came from further south, and whereas near modern-day London, Essex, places like that, and they were far more industrious and cared more about education. And many of the stereotypes that are attributed to black Americans in the United States, if you look them up, were attributed to the Scots-Irish and the Irish long before they were attributed to black people. Before the Great Migration of black people from the United States to northern cities and look and search for work, northern white people refused to rent to southern white people who were from Scots-Irish descent because they were loud. They hit their women. They were promiscuous. They were fighters. You know, they were rude. They were crass. All of these things, and they would come to the north looking for jobs, and they too wouldn't get jobs. And this is who we inherited a culture from. We inherited a culture of honor and a culture of shoot first, ask questions later from the white people we were in proximity from. It is not a natural occurrence for where we came from in West Africa. It's a completely different hierarchy system. So I say all of that to say poverty porn is American. It's not black American. It's not hip hop. Honor, having this glorification of struggle is quintessentially what it means to be American. Everything in America is about coming up from the mud, getting it how you can, and it's okay if it's illegal as long as you don't get caught and if you can get clean afterwards. And we've always been rooting for that type of figure ever since the inception of our country. Our forefathers were gangsters. These guys glorify themselves as starting the American Revolution by throwing tea in a harbor, when the only reason they threw British tea in the harbor is because they were all smugglers who were smuggling tea and selling it on the black market. And the British got so angry with them that they started creating these blockades. And when they cut into their black market profits, then they dumped the British's tea in the water because they was cutting into their side hustles in the black market. So these were already gangsters from the beginning of our country. We've always rooted for this type of person. We root for them in our films, whether it's Scarface or Goodfellas. We root for them in every aspect of our culture. Donald Trump is the same thing, right? That's a glorification of a thug, you know? So I don't necessarily agree that that is a hip hop problem, but it is something that is very much a negative aspect of American culture.
Most definitely, and just in a bit of context in relation to, pinning it to hip hop, because it's something that I guess hip hop gets responsible for here from, from experience, I guess, is that, hip hop and being black is this only, and I think it's important to ask that question in the way that you've clarified it and broken it down, because I think it's important to hear those other perspectives and not always be in that assumption. I guess, we're always learning. And that's the point of, doing things like this and talking and having a conversation, because asking these questions can, bring a different perspective. And speaking of perspective, something as well that, I wanted to talk about with you is emotions, is something that we can relate to as black peoples. Emotions is something that's frowned upon in our communities. It's something that happens globally that I can relate to with black people from different parts of the globe. What are your thoughts around the lack of being able to express our emotions in our family homes and upbringings, and the lack of support to safely express our emotions, and where do you think that stems from?
I couldn't say in general where that stems from. I can say from my upbringing, and maybe it will resonate, and maybe it is something that's general. I just don't have the exposure to realize this is something that we all go through. But the ability to articulate emotions is a privilege. And it's a privilege that when you're thinking about where your next meal is gonna come from, or when you're living check to check, you don't have the ability or the privilege to articulate your emotions. If anything, in the areas where, I grew up and the people where I'm around, being emotionally transparent or vulnerable can be a liability. I've asked myself this often with my own parents, and from what I can see is, imagine if you encourage your child in a very dangerous neighborhood to be emotionally expressive. They're in school, they're on the basketball court, they walking home, it's dudes on the street that's trying to test them from that culture of honor that we inherited. And you say to them, because your parents encouraged you to, I don't like how you make me feel. What do you think those people are going to do to them? You just put your child out in front of wolves, right? So almost as a way of subconsciously protecting our children in environments that are unsafe, we encourage ourselves to suppress emotions in order to survive where we come from. It's a survival mechanism, whether it's in a developing country that's war-torn, that's home to a dictatorship or extreme poverty. These things are a survival mechanism that you really only have the privilege to unload when you have a high level of safety, right? And we cannot judge and go back to other cultures that don't have that privilege and say there's something fundamentally wrong with your cultures because you don't express these emotions to yourselves or to your children. We are speaking from a place of privilege, and to have that is a privilege, and that's from what I've seen. You know, I can't say that in general, but that's my own personal opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. I absolutely relate to that privilege of expressing your emotions to the fullest, and it's an important thing to be able to do. And I mean, I've got children myself, and it's something that I've raised them completely different to how I've been raised.
Absolutely, same here.
Because it's something that you do, right? You just go, I don't want you to go through what I went through, so let me save you while I can. Eventually, we'll get there.
Well, we have that privilege now. As simple as that.
Privilege of emotions.
Yeah, we have it. We have the freedom. Like, we have time privilege. Our parents didn't have time privilege.
Yeah.
You know, my dad would be gone before I woke up. First half of my life, my dad was a baker. So I wake up, I'm in elementary school, I'm making my own breakfast and walking myself to school because my dad's gone. He'd been gone since like 4 o'clock in the morning. You know, I'm seeing myself out. I'm 7, 8 years old. You know, I come home, he's knocked out sleep. So I'm taking care of myself again, you know? And that was it, like time privilege. The amount of time I have to spend with my kids is crazy. You know, I take my kids to school in the morning and daycare. I work about a 6-hour day. That's it. I work 6 hours. That's crazy. You know, I pick my kids up in the afternoon. We go to the park. We go to the library. What? Like, that's crazy. So I have time privilege now. These are things that our parents didn't have, you know?
And it's also the generational difference, right? Because our parents came here. I was born in Uganda, and, you know, a lot of people of us who were born in the diaspora or born in anywhere you're from, they came here from scratch. They had, like, similar to your story. Your story is something that's very common where, you know, the parent or the parents leave everything behind, leave the family and everyone behind to start from scratch. And I think it's something that needs to be taken into consideration when dealing with us, is that, you know, we've come from people who've had to start from scratch, we've had to completely let go of everything. And then there's also that piece around culture. You know, how do you still keep your culture? How do you instill your culture? Does it become important? Does it even matter after a while? Because it's like, you're here now, what are you going to do with your life, you know?
I mean, it's this is a third culture problem, right? And this is a conversation that I have with a lot of my friends who are first generation to the States, where it's this sliding scale of emotion that we have on how we feel about our upbringings and our relationship with our parents. And many of my peers have this resentment for their parents not being there enough because they grew up in America where they compared their parents and their upbringings to their American friends. And that's so unfair to your parents. And I come from that perspective of having complete understanding for the fact that I was like, Dad, I'm in a basketball team and we have a game. You know, the other parents come and my dad was like, Anna, I'm not playing, only you're playing. Why would I come? He's like, why? Like, and I'm like, hey, you got a point. Yeah. So no, my father was not at my games and PTA meetings and parties, and I didn't have costumes for school, and I didn't have none of that. Like, my father, like, what are you talking about? You go to school to get an education. What are these white people on? Like, what is this? Bake sale? What is this? Right? So I have full knowledge of where both my parents come from because I am them. But they have only half the knowledge on what I am. And that's just the way it is because I'm the one who's raised in a complete different culture than them. So when if you're, shout out to my Sudanese people in the crowd. I see y'all. Why would our parents encourage us to be graphic designers and photographers if where they came from, those jobs never existed? Right? So you can't hold it against them when they are quote unquote not supportive. Why would they be? They have no concept of the existence of these jobs. They only want you to do jobs that they themselves know are safe where they come from. But now you are in this whole new world where you understand a system of opportunity that they can't even fathom. So just don't listen to them respectfully. Like, just do you and respectfully say, yeah, I'm gonna still do the degree thing or whatever. I mean, I didn't, but that you have to have some acceptance for the fact that they cannot comprehend what we are,
Yeah, cheers to that. I fully appreciate you expressing that because, we've missed out a lot from just holding on these grudges that are unnecessary, right? Now, let me clarify something. You're from Washington?
100.
Okay, so
you been around my been around my way before? You been out
I
here?
haven't. I haven't.
Man, you gotta
but
come
I'm very
kick it.
Curious.
Because everybody always go to New York and everything. I'm like, y'all need to come down here and kick it with us.
I want to go to the birthplace of hip hop.
I mean, it's cool. It's cool. But we got go-go though. We got our own music. That junk be cranking for real.
I want to ask you about that. But look,
I'm sorry. Let me switch back to standard American English for y'all.
Well, first, eventually we'll get there. But I'm really curious to know, like Washington D.C. It's where it all goes down. It's a big White House where we all see other things coming. What's going on there? What's going on?
Let me paint a different
just so
picture
it doesn't
for
look.
you.
It looks a certain way this way, but maybe
Sure.
you can.
As my father said when he first saw the White House, I thought it was gonna be bigger. D.C. is the capital of the United States and, by default, the capital of the world. Take it how you want, what that means. But a lot of decisions get made there that affect the rest of the world, right? It is also a very, very interesting place for several reasons. So it has some of the oldest historically black colleges in the United States, and it is one of the only cities that up until maybe 10 years ago was majority black. And is no longer majority black due to gentrification, but it is still 48% black, right? It is a very wealthy place, and it is a place, everybody here familiar with the term called affirmative action? All right. Okay. So affirmative action happens, and you have to give people of color and women jobs, and there's this quota. And black women kill two birds with one stone because they're women and people of color. So from the 60s on, you see this acceleration of women in the workplace in the District of Columbia, predominantly because the law took effect there, so it was the first place that they wanted to make an example of this new law. So you get people like my mother who dropped out of high school at 16 years old, working as a secretary in the patent office, making very, very good money. And by the 80s and 90s, they're heading divisions with just high school diplomas or not. And then they marry someone who, through affirmative action, work for the postal service or the subway system or the bus system. And they take this two-parent income and they move out to Prince George's County, which is the wealthiest population of black people in America. And we are the closest thing to a real-life Wakanda. It's crazy. Where I grew up was 96% black. There was like no white people where I'm from. The doctors, the lawyers, the bus drivers, the drug dealer is black, the police officer arresting them is black, the lawyer is black, and the judge is black. So you cannot say this is happening to you because you're black where I'm from. Like everybody's black. It's like I didn't understand how unnormal that was until I left and started touring and seeing the rest of the United States. Where I'm from is not normal. It is not a representation of the United States at all. It is an oasis. That's D.C. That's my side of D.C. It's black nepotism, where your parents were the first generation to go to college and they work in government. And then when you go to Howard or Morgan or Towson or Hampton, any other black college, when you come home, your parents get you a job in that division, and then you buy a house not too far from theirs, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It ain't always a good thing. There's a lot of closed-minded people where I'm from as a result of that. But that's the side of DC that I love, that you can truly be black in DC and be a person first, not a black person. When I moved to New York and I finally got around people who grew up in communities where they were like, I'm from a place where only 3% of the population is black. I'm coming here to exercise my blackness. And I'm like, man, y'all extra black. And it's like, what is wrong? And I'm talking to my homies back home and I'm like, yo, you know what's crazy? We grew up being people first. We didn't have to be black people because everybody's black where we're from. But these people that we're now surrounded around clearly knew they were black people first. And sharing spaces with that and hearing those stories, that came very late in my life. Meeting people who were marginalized, the victims of racism, you know, it's very late in my life that I was like, so tell me, what was that like? You've been called the N-word before? Like, what's that like? Because where I'm from, like white people don't even exist. You know, like they're such a non-factor. We don't think about them. They don't decide our fates. They don't determine whether we get jobs or not. You know, that's my side of DC. There is a whole other side. DC is split up into 4 quadrants: northwest, southwest, northeast, southeast. Northeast is majority black. Southeast is completely black. Southwest is where all of the business and government is. And Northwest traditionally was very, very white. We just didn't go to Northwest like that.
So we don't see that.
Yeah.
It's important to hear that. That's a really like, wow, this is a shock. I wonder what that feels like, is
Yeah.
what I'm thinking. Like, what does that feel like?
Yeah.
I don't think we can have this conversation without discussing like the ongoing genocides that are happening around Africa, firstly, and also in Palestine. But in a nutshell, for someone who's, I guess, not aware, how would you describe the ongoing civil war that's happening in Sudan?
I mean, I would hope everybody in here was aware. But if not, to sum it up, you have 2 homicidal generals fighting for supremacy to be the next dictator. That's the summary. The people are caught in the crossfires of a proxy war between United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia and Russia and the United States and Egypt and Ethiopia and Turkey. And any one of those larger countries are funding either side and allowing this genocide to just continue going on and on and on, because our lives don't matter to them. Our land does. Our resources do. And there are a lot of major players playing a role in the genocide and the war that's happening in Sudan. It is far bigger than just the 2 rival factions that are fighting one another. But the same could be said about every conflict around the world. They are truly being shadow funded by far bigger entities. It is no coincidence that the entire Sahel region of Africa is on fire at the same time. It has everything to do with Russia trying to change the access of power to counter the embargoes and sanctions that were placed on Russia by fucking with France, by ruining their relationships with all of their former colonies. So that we are caught in the middle of a power struggle between Western imperialism.
And how is that affecting or impacting your family? I know that your father's over there.
My father's there now.
And recently you spoke to him online, right? Got a glimpse of that. And I mean, what did he say, and what's it like? Like, what's he saying about it? Well, how's he surviving? Because when we see these things, we just think, oh my gosh, it's completely impossible. And I think it's important to put that awareness of it. And you know what we as, you know, African people in the diaspora and non-African people can do around that. But what did your father say?
It's wild when you talk to people that are actually in these situations. So my father came to the United States in 1976, and he moved back to Sudan with my siblings in 2007. From 2007 till now, he's only come back to America twice. He has no desire to come back to the States. He built himself a good life, retired early, and was chilling. Then this war breaks out, and the Janjaweed, what they call themselves to legitimize themselves, rapid support force. You know, these guys are mercenaries who were just seizing people's properties as they were invading territory. And my father was like, nah, I've worked my entire life to have something here, and I'm not gonna have somebody take it. So I'm staying put. And everybody else left. His brothers and sisters, they all went to Egypt, they went to Canada, they went back to America. And my dad was like, I'm 70. He had a conversation with me when we was trying to get him out. He's like, what I'm gonna do? Sit in your house and watch TV? He's like, I'm 70 years old. I don't wanna just sit on the couch and watch TV. If I'm gonna die in my own country. I'm gonna die on my land. I'm done kind of running. I evaded the first several wars by going to school in England and then going to the United States and getting citizenship and skipping out on having to do military service. I'm here now. I'm 70. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. So he decided to stay, and I had to respect his decision. He operates out of a place of pride, and I know my father intimately. I don't agree with him, but his ego is far stronger than his need to just quote unquote survive. And he doesn't want to go through life thinking that everything he did was for nothing. And if he leaves and his place is bombed, he will feel his children aren't enough, seeing his grandchildren aren't enough, because for him, like I said, it's my basketball game. These are my kids. And this is his way of love. And he's like, surviving just to just live is not enough for him. He wants to be in a space that he built. And I respect that. And he decided to stay. And my dad is a soldier, man. Like, he transformed his apartment building of 16 units into a shelter. He dug a secondary well and is feeding, giving housing, and taking care of his entire neighborhood. There are people coming from other neighborhoods seeking shelter with my dad. He's completely just transformed the man who he was. And I think a lot of that was redemption. We all have our skeletons, and my dad spent a large portion of his life not being a good man. He's done things that he's not proud of, and to survive. And this is his payback. This is how he's redeeming himself. And he's doing an amazing job. I don't think he's gonna have any problem getting into paradise, you know, for what he's been doing now. And he's kept a comedic tone the entire time. This is a true thing. I haven't spoken to my dad in weeks. I don't know what's happening with him, because he's been feeding all of these people. The army, the Sudanese army, has known that his area is a safe space, and they fought off all the insurgencies and pushed out the Janjaweed from his area, and they are able to come freely in and out of his area now, and they go to him to, you know, kind of get reports on what's going on in the neighborhood. So my dad had access to a Starlink. You guys know what Starlink is? Starlink is the thing Elon Musk made, where it's this like mobile satellite that gives phone service anywhere in the world. So one of the soldiers had a Starlink in the back of the truck, and he was like, I gotta call my son. So that's why I was able to speak to him. No one else had service. It was still a blackout in the whole country. And I'm like, how are you able to talk to me? He's like, yo, check this out. He's got a Starlink. And I'm like, all right, cool. I'm like, how are you? He's like, yo, it's like Gaza out here, man. I'm like Gaza? Like, you are in a war zone. Why are you comparing it to another war zone, right? And he's like showing me like, you know your uncle? They dropped a bomb on his building. Mine? Fine. Right? I'm like, yo, this is very wild. Like, his attitude is crazy right now.
Like you said, he's 70, he's lived his life, and that's wow. Thank you so much for sharing that. I didn't think we could hear these perspectives like in person like that. So sending all the best and blessed energies to your father, your people, and everybody in Sudan, everyone all over the continent of Africa.
Appreciate it.
Now, countries like the USA, UK, Australia are all headquarters of colonization, and they manufacture and supply the murderous weapons and assault that devastate human rights before our eyes that we're all witnessing, and it's all through our taxpayer money. What's it like traveling the world right now as an American citizen while Israel continues to increase their genocidal war on Palestine, on children, on families, on the entire population? I mean, I'm not saying that you're the, face of that, but I'm really interested. What is it like traveling the world right now while this is all happening?
What it's like, from my perspective, is seeing history repeat itself constantly. And this is our moment in time to see genocide, apartheid, expansion, murder, greed. This is our lifetime of experiencing these things. But the English did that in Australia. The Aztecs and Mayans did that to their neighbors along the coast, which is why they invited the Spanish in the first place. The Maori went from island to island and conquered other islands that weren't a part of their people. The Han expanded all through Asia and conquered non-Han ethnic people. The Niger Congo of Africa had probably one of the largest expansions that is unspoken of, where they created independently agriculture in the Niger Congo region and took over everything in sub-Saharan Africa. And the only people who survived that were the Bushmen of Namibia, right? Those are the only people who ethnically survived that expansion of land being conquered and grabbed. This is a human issue. We have a serious problem as a species, right? There were a whole race of people living in Europe called hunter-gatherers that were completely wiped out and assimilated by Anatolian farmers who left Eastern Europe, where the Black Sea was, and took agriculture and just wiped them out and replaced their whole culture and took everything from them. We have a problem. The Vikings did it. The Romans did it. We have a problem as a people. This is our moment to experience it. It is never, that doesn't condone it, but we are not getting to the fundamental issue of we as a people have a serious issue. And this is our moment to deal with that issue.
Word, land grab, as they say, the land
yeah,
grabbing.
Yeah.
Well, as we speak, there's activists and students and educators protesting and setting up encampments at universities. It's happening here at the Sydney University, and it's just 10 minutes away. So if you do, happen to walk by there, pop in and say hi. A lot of our friends organise that. How important is it? And we're seeing educational institutes all over the world just suppressing knowledge. The same spaces where we're told go there, get an education. How important do you think it is for hip hop as a tool to educate the masses?
I'm thinking because I think art always has a responsibility to educate, but I don't think that it's its sole responsibility. I think that art is always supposed to be everything. So if you are an artist who has a calling to activism, that is your calling, and you should use your voice and your music to fight for causes as an artist. If you are an artist that gravitates more towards entertainment, you should not be held to the same standard as an artist who wants to have a political voice and an opinion. And we shouldn't hold every artist, at this standard where you have to have an opinion. Some artists are just pure artists. My art tells me to speak. I'm friends with people who their art tells them to simply just entertain. I think that there's this bottlenecking, especially with minorities, because there aren't so many opportunities for us to rise and descend to such positions of power and authority where our opinions matter, that we bottleneck and expect every famous person or wealthy person to have an opinion about everything. And that's a huge responsibility that most people can't bear. I personally don't care about what LeBron James thinks about what's going on in anything outside of basketball. I don't care. Did he study poli-sci? It's like, what do I care? Somebody famous interview, somebody asking Young Thug about his opinion on something. I'm like, what? Care about what Young Thug.
Did you hear what he says?
Did you hear his music? Like,
where's the connection?
like, why are we asking this person? So I don't think it's everybody's responsibility to do everything. Hip hop is a beautiful thing because it is a tool that can lend itself to so many different causes, opinions, and ideas. And for those artists that's their calling, do that. Do that. I think that's very, very important because it's such an influential music You know, what we talk about in this music reaches people outside of our bubbles. You know, again, I'm from a place where there's only 13% of the population is me. So I get this chance to talk to people outside of me. How am I going to influence them? Am I going to regurgitate stereotypes and tropes? Am I going to educate them? I think I want to educate somebody else who might not have the same privileges of me to view their experiences from the outside within, might not have the privilege to want to educate because they don't even have the tools to. I find that the fundamental issue that we have in most of society today is we have lost the ability to learn how to learn. You know, we have access to so much knowledge and information, but we actually don't know how to digest it anymore, right? So there's so many of us who, yeah, we have all of this exposure to things, but so what if you have exposure when you don't know how to absorb the information, right? So we gotta stop looking for everybody to have an opinion on everything.
Word. That's very powerful, impactful, and I think it's important for us to hear it like that. Thank you for sharing your knowledge. It's not over yet.
Oh, all
We've
good.
talked a lot about identity. And
I'm chilling.
everything
Y'all
you
good?
just said, well,
All right.
yeah, clearly they are, because no one's even got enough to get a drink or go to the bathroom. Like, this is amazing. That means well engaged and the conversation's working well. And everything you said is absolutely important to hear and for us to remember, because what you find is that when people get together and actually in person gather, you find that all these stereotypical things that we have thoughts of actually don't really exist, and we have more in common than we actually think. Well, I'd like to set the tone now as we go into speaking about music. Music is timeless. You know, it's doesn't matter the distance between an artist's last release, and it's not a measure of their success, but I really believe it's a legacy. So I'd like to play something now from
God.
you.
I hate hearing my own music. Make it quick.
Well, when I was I feel like we have a lot in common. All right, Lachlan, hit the tape.
I think the biggest risk I've taken in my career was choosing to do music as a career. It's insane. The odds are completely against you. I must always understand that whenever I'm not working, someone else is. Whenever I'm not evolving, someone else is. Whenever I'm not in the studio, someone else is. And that constantly keeps me on my toes. Honesty, you will most likely fail, but take risk in life.
You got the skills for this. You ain't got the bill for this. You ain't play your part for this. You ain't got the smarts for this. You ain't got the ear for this. You ain't cried a tears for this. You ain't got the years for this. You ain't play a part for this. You ain't made a mark for this. You ain't got the heart for this. You ain't got the heart for this. You ain't got the heart for it.
That hits the heart. Right? That hit me in my heart personally. Can anybody else relate? Anybody put your hands up if that especially the way he just hit them bars, you ain't got the heart for this. Because really, like, those of us who choose to do this from the heart, taking your heart with you everywhere and sharing it with everyone. I just want to talk about your work ethic and how you describe it. And do you work outside of music? Like, have you ever had to work? I know it's your work. I'm not disputing that.
No, never.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, but that's not because that's not because I'm some sort of an outlier or anything. My father was an entrepreneur, and he had a series of different jobs and hustles. In that song, it talks about it. He opened up a diner, and I talk about it in that song. It failed. Then he became a baker, and then his homies put him on to trucking, and he transitioned into trucking, and that's when my dad made the most of his money. So he had these delivery trucks, and you guys had Staples in Australia, office supply company? You have an office supply store, right? Office Works. Probably, all right. So the equivalent of Office Works is a company called Staples in the United States, and my father was a subcontractor for them, where they would subcontract out all the deliveries that needed to go out to all the offices and residential areas in the D.C. area and give them to contractors like my father to make deliveries. It paid good. I think it was like usually like $7 a stop, and a truck would average no less than 40 stops a day. And my father had 12 trucks at $7 a stop, 40 stops a day. And whenever I wasn't in school, I worked for my dad. I was on, and he owned a company, but he always drove and took a route himself every single day. So we would wake up 5 in the morning, go to the warehouse. The manifest would come down from Pennsylvania. We print it out. We load all of the packages onto all the different trucks for their routes, give everybody their routes. And then me and him would hop in a truck, and we would just make deliveries all through D.C. And he was lazy, so he would just do all the driving, and I had to jump out and carry all the copy paper to all the offices. So I loved it because I learned my whole city, you know. So when I wasn't in school, I worked for my father, right? So that is a place of privilege where I can say I was able to transition from that to music. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Earlier on, you started to talk about this a little bit. I was like hoping you wouldn't go into it because I'm really interested to hear. I love your production. As producers, lovers of production, your music is incredible. But tell us about what go-go music is and DMV roots. To give us the insights and the backgrounds on that and how much of that is involved in your production and music.
Well, go-go music is a percussion funk-based music that derives from jazz. Its creator, a gentleman by the name of Chuck Brown, rest in peace, used to have a band called Chuck Brown and the Soul Searchers. In the 70s, they have a hit song called Bustin' Loose, if you've ever heard it. Or you can look it up. I feel like bustin' loose, I feel like bustin' loose. So that's a D.C. anthem. Go-go was created because we had, like I said, a lot of black wealth. So we had these events called cabarets. And,
I got a lot here.
Okay.
But probably not in the same way.
Yeah.
If you saw a cabaret, you'd be like,
That
no diss, like the cabarets are amazing, but I'm also aware that the cabarets where you're from are probably on another level.
I don't know about cabarets down here, so you're going to have to hit me.
Cabarets?
All right.
Dun, dun, dun.
Okay. So we had what we call cabarets. It's like these black socials where someone will rent out some type of a hall, and someone will do the catering, and some person's making the money from getting people in the door, and they take the money to pay a band, and it's a hustle, right? And you go to mingle with people and, you know, meet maybe your future partner or somebody that you could do business with, et cetera. And these things were constant in D.C. So Chuck Brown was a band player for a lot of these cabarets. So what he basically ran into this problem of is like, we don't have enough music to keep playing these, and we definitely don't have enough to keep playing the whole night, and we can't just keep making new songs. So how about we come up with a groove, and then whatever there's hit songs that's out, we can adopt that hit song into this groove, and people can just dance all night, and they'll be dancing to something with some familiarity. So the go-go is congos, a pocket beat that grooves, and then you take whatever popping on radio, and you make a go-go version of that, and we dance to that all night. When it got super, super popular, bands started emerging where they started to make their own original music, and it stopped being the music that just copied what was out. And it got very, very popular in the 80s, where a gentleman by the name of Teddy Riley moves from New York to Virginia, has exposure to it by way of Hampton University, where a lot of Washingtonians go to school, and it influences New Jack Swing, which is the same rhythm at the time. And New Jack Swing takes off into rap and blends rap and R&B and evolves into what hip hop is today. But go-go went into a completely different direction because it always stayed a live music. It's never been programmed. You'd be hard pressed to find recordings of go-go music from those times. What we would do growing up is you go to the clubs on the weekends, and there would be a PA recording that night, and then they would mass produce that tape. And then when you go to school, you would trade cassette tapes of that club performance. So we would go to school and be like, hey, young, you got that 2518? I trade you that junk for that 0231. You got the 0231? Yeah, at the Ibex? How you get that junk? I heard they only made like 500 copies of that. And them joints were sold out like a mug. Huh, man, young, I trade you that junk stamp. So that's how it would be. Like we would trade go-go tapes in school to these performances that were happening almost nightly. One go-go song that got real popular, the chorus from that song was taken by a very famous New York rapper. 4 in the morning, I'm kicking it out. And then 6 in the morning, I'm sending it out. And that was Jay-Z, who Jay-Z used to hustle in D.C. and Maryland. So he got hip to go-go. And he took a very famous go-go song and made a hit out of it. That was a #1 on New York charts. Rich Harrison, one of my favorite producers of all time, rest in peace. Go-go producer who joins the Hitmen and Bad Boy era, and then goes on to meet a woman named A. Marie, where he writes and produces for her, and she has a hit called One Thing, which is a go-go song. And One Thing was so big that Beyonce hears it, and he produces Crazy Right Now for her, which is a go-go song. So you've heard go-go without just knowing that you heard go-go music, but it's very much alive and well, and it's the predominant music where I come from.
Wow, that's amazing lesson there, and it just tells me that every music just stems back to black music. It's just the history of black music. I want to go a bit into that, but I just, for those, a lot of us here are musicians, artists, and I think it's important to, understand someone like yourself. You're internationally acclaimed. You're celebrated in massive platforms like NPR, Time Magazine. How do you get into these spaces without major label support? And, for those artists who do strive for that major label support and don't, they don't succeed, or they, the doors are closed on them, what would be a way to approach your artistry and the way the world hears your sounds? And how you've been able to do that without, and still be able to touch these major platforms?
If I had to give myself any credit for that, it would be making a conscious decision to tour with the live band and no longer use profanity in my lyrics. Once I realized that there were markets that I could get in that were shut off to rap based on the fact that I toured with high-level musicians, and that you didn't even have to bleep out my lyrics. They were just clean. That was a conscious decision when I got my first sync deal. The first time I got a sync deal was a fit band, for Nike fit band, and it featured, I forgot what his name was, but he played for the San Diego Chargers at the time. And they loved the song, and the guy who licensed it was like, oh, this is great because we were looking for songs that don't have profanity in it. And I was like, well, can't you just take a clean version? He said no, because our demographics, even if they know that the cuss word is there and it's bleeped out, that might bother them. And by demographics, I'll leave that up to your imagination what they mean, right? So I said, I see. So even bleeping it out isn't enough. He's like, no, it can't be there at all. You'll have a higher success rate of licensing. So I'm like, well, I'm trying to make a living from rap. So I cuss like a sailor in my house in my spare time, but fuck that. I'm not cussing no more in my lyrics, right? So I started to be able to be more palatable to said demographic outside of my 13% because I stopped using profanity. And then I toured with a live band, and we come from go-go. So my band comes from jazz, gospel, funk, and soul, because you have to in D.C. So we get booked for these festivals. Why I lie to you not? We're the only hip-hop act on these festivals. We did a festival in 2018 called Misop Rock Festival in Thailand, in Bangkok. It was a punk rock festival. And we were voted best performance of the festival. So it's creating a sound, creating an aesthetic, and creating lyrics that would resonate with a series of people and that was palatable led me to be able to be discovered by a lot more people. A lot of my fans will say, I don't listen to rap, but I listen to you. And that's a very common thing that I hear often. So that I can attribute to myself. Those were conscious decisions that I made. What I can't take credit for is, you said like NPR, Time Magazine. I have a publicist. I am in the machine. I control it, right? I'm not on a major, but I used to be on a label called Mellow Music. Mellow Music was distributed by The Orchard. The Orchard is a subsidiary of Sony. The Orchard, when they joined forces with Sony, became the largest digital distributor in the world. That is who I release my music through, right? My publisher for years was Surefire Media. It's owned by Bruce Springsteen, right? So yeah, I'm in NPR. I better be. Like, you know, like what am I paying for, you know? So I have a machine behind me, but my machine doesn't tell me what to do. I don't have to dress a certain way. I don't have to put out a certain single. There's nobody telling me I got to make TikTok dances, right? I'm not in that machine, right? The machine that I am in is very much, I have, I just started working with a new publisher. So I won't put that out there yet because I haven't worked with her yet, but I have high promise because I worked with her in the past. So I have a new publisher. My publishing is solicited by Buddha Music Publishing out of Berlin. My distributor for my label, I have my own label called Outer Note Label. My distributor is The Orchard. I have a manager, you know. I have a videographer. I have a team. I have a graphic designer. You know, I have all of the things that a major has because my ethos has always been micro, macro. Apply what majors do on a smaller scale. Don't completely reject it. You have to just adopt that template to your size and scale it down, right? And you can do that when you have a higher return on investment. So because I write my own songs, record my own songs, produce my own songs, I sell less and make more than someone who's on a major, right? It takes me a shorter time to recoup. And so my metrics are completely different for me on what's a successful record versus someone who's on some major label who has to sell an insane amount to recoup. So I just apply the same systems of a major and I just scaled it down. Micro, macro, but you cannot escape art and commerce. You know, I get back to that, you know.
The measures of success, right? We have there's different measures of success and it's not always at the top. It's not always has to be big. It, as you say, a micro measure. So, yeah.
I mean, what is success?
Yeah.
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 Success for me is doing what I want with my time. Eating what I want when I want it, sleeping when I want, going where I want to go when I want to, you know, is success. And, you know, alhamdulillah, I've been able to do that for over 20 years. So I'm good. What else is there? And I can still go outside and not be bothered by people. I can still take my kids to the playground and nobody bother me.
And you
know?
can still line up to get your own meal.
Why would I not? You know?
I was trying to be like, let me serve you, let me get the food for you. Especially, I can line up. I love that. One last question, very important one. This is something that is very passionate to many and something that we're trying to navigate. You know, the American music industry has a long history of whitewashing black music and erasing black artists. Here in Australia, the industry has a similar, if not the same agenda of whitewashing, of erasure, and it's ongoing. Do you have any suggestions on what we as black people in music can do to push back against cultural appropriation and the erasure to ensure black artists protect the historical legacy of black music and also maintain the rightful respect and authority?
I mean, that's a heavy question.
It's not.
Nah, you
you
good.
Like, we can't have this conversation without bringing it up.
Sure. I would like to see more of a fight for equity and not equality. I am not concerned with being anybody's equal. I just want equity. And I think we should start to care more about equity or care as much about equity as we do equality. You will oftentimes hear in the United States where people will say things like, look what the Jewish community was able to do and they were a minority, but we couldn't do that because, you know, white Anglo-Saxon Americans always had their foots on our neck and wouldn't leave us alone. But the difference is equity versus equality. You're dealing with the people who were fine being ostracized and alienated and secluded to themselves as long as they maintained equity. And with their equity, they were able to buy in and invest in what it is to be America, right? But without equity, you can't actually have equality. So you can acknowledge me as your equal, but if I don't have equal pay, what good is the acknowledgement of being your equal, right? So I'm all about equity over equality. I'm not trying to be anybody's friend. I don't need your awards. I don't need your acceptance, acknowledgement, or approval of my identity or my ethnicity. Let me make as much money as you have and leave me the fuck alone. Straight up. Like, I don't care what you got going on over on that side. I don't need you to accept me. You know, I need you to leave me alone, most importantly. And whenever we've been left alone in the United States of America, we've been prolific. Tulsa, Oklahoma, Wilmington, North Carolina. You talking 5-10 years after the abolishment of slavery, and we already had elected officials and a thriving black middle class in Wilmington, North Carolina. It didn't take any time. White people saw that and burnt the whole thing down. They were like, nah, y'all can't have it like that. Same thing happened in California, Weeksville, in Brooklyn. There have been plenty of times without aid and charity where if you just leave us alone, we will be fine. The issue is they will not leave us alone, right? So I'm far more interested in equity and being left alone than equality.
Thank you for that inspirational insight. Can we get a round of applause for that? Come on now. We've never heard that response before. It's usually like, yeah, fight for it. No, I absolutely agree.
I'm just not here for acknowledgement.
Yeah,
I don't need acknowledgement, you know?
Yeah, and it's learning. And I think, yeah, that's why we ask questions, because, you know, we need to learn before we make assumptions and just think we know it, or, you know, once we know, we're always learning. I'd like to bring it to you all because, hello, you've been so amazing, just chilling and engaged. This is the time that we open up the floor for Q&A. This is your opportunity. Like, you're going to be here on Saturday night with a room packed full of people. You probably won't even get a chance to have a conversation or ask a question.
I'll be outside afterwards. Don't even trip.
Yeah, does anyone want to share any questions? Yeah, can I bring the mic to you? Yeah.
That's all good.
You good.
Oh, okay. No. Thank you, Oddisee, for actually being honest and being vulnerable here. And speaking for us, I'm Sudanese. So my name is Omar. Really appreciate this, actually, more than you think. But my question is, speaking on identity and being black in the West, I wasn't born in the West. I came to the West, mid-20s, right? And that's a very different perspective. I was in the Middle East my whole life. And there's a lot of things you're saying that are extremely relatable. But I don't want to turn this into a whole conversation. I want to give you a question so everybody else can get a chance. So first of all, there's a 70s book by Chancellor Williams called The Destruction of Black Civilization, right? That book speaks about how Egypt and Sudan were the birthplace of the first kingdoms in the world, from the agricultural revolution to the building of, places of living, to all of that. That, I believe, that needs to be researched into, to connect it to how jazz came about, how, slavery, because I'm from the side of Sudan that was not enslaved. Actually, I was from the side of Sudan that my grandparents were slave owners. And the identity crisis
You're Jali?
No, I'm Dongolawi.
I'm Dongolawi.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so basically what I'm trying to say is the West knows us black people as this victims of slavery, so and so and so. And that's not inaccurate, it's just half the picture. The other half of the picture is we are self-determined and we are creative naturally. And when you said your stuff about D.C., I grew up with black people where I only realized my blackness when I went to school with Arabs. But besides that, I was just another guy. So how much because you say you're a historian, I'm asking you this, and I'm sorry if I'm catching you off guard in any way.
Oh, no.
But what I'm trying to ask is, how much more research do you think we need to do as black people, and then as Sudanese people specifically, and what are the biggest questions for us, from your perspective, because it will be different from mine? Thank you.
No, thanks, man. I think we as black people need to stop looking at history through the eyes of Western imperialism. We don't realize how much we observe our past and the opinions that we gather from it through Western imperialism and how it shapes us to look at race and look at history, right? For an example, we'll say, oh, Moors were black because look at these Renaissance paintings of Moors. They were black. So the Moors from Morocco who conquered Andalusia for 400 years were black men. The majority of them were Amazigh. And the Amazigh were not only of sub-Saharan extract, they were a myriad of different tribes. During the Reconquista, the Spanish wanted to clearly distinguish themselves from their former colonizers. So because they share so much DNA with each other, when they created these paintings hundreds of years afterwards, they wanted to make it clear who was the Moor and who was the Spaniard. So they made the Moors significantly darker so that you could tell the distinction. And it is those paintings that we use to say these people were black. So there's a lot of learning that we have to do. You said that the first civilizations come from Egypt and Sudan. Genetically, anthropologically, the first civilizations come from between the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers. So when we talk about the definition of what civilization is, it is a sediment lifestyle where it was based on agriculture and it had some sort of centralization of government, language, writing, etc. These things first originated along the Eurasian axis. The Eurasian axis is a latitude that goes all the way from China all across to the British Isles. This axis is extremely important because anything that can grow in one area can grow in the other because it shares the same latitude. So the chicken originally comes from China and the apple comes from Kazakhstan. The sheep and the cow and wheat originally come from Anatolia and where modern day Iraq and Iran are from. Grapes originate in Georgia, I believe it is. So all these things come from the Eurasian axis, and where one came from, it was able to trade with another. Ask yourself why a lot of those things didn't make itself to sub-Saharan Africa, because the longest access line in sub-Saharan Africa is north to south, where what grows here cannot grow here, because here is arid and dry and here is tropical. What region benefited from the proximity to the Middle East where these civilizations occurred was Egypt, because it was close enough where it shared the same latitude, where it was able to get this technology and grow these things along the River Nile. So it is another perspective through the eyes of Pan-Africanism to want to say that not only humanity comes from Africa, but all is civilization. Civilization is different from humanity. Humanity does come from Africa. Civilization has its roots in the Middle East. And the first empires that were able to reap the benefits in Africa from that civilization were in fact Egypt. Once they reaped those benefits, they played an integral role in influencing what happened in those civilizations. So it was a cultural exchange going back and forth. Hieroglyphs did eventually evolve into our modern day letters. You know, the letter A comes from Aleph, and Aleph was a hieroglyph that fundamentally meant the same thing that it does now, right? So there was a cultural exchange that was happening. These are the things that I want us to know. We have to separate our political issues with our former colonizers in the way we view history, because we're looking to rewrite history to empower ourselves for a history that was taken away from us, and sometimes we get it wrong. And we tell fabrications or we exaggerate things that happen. I have a highly controversial opinion that I share, that I have, but I'm completely transparent with it, where I would like to see us discuss, we've had far more of a cultural exchange than Western imperialism would like to admit. It's not that they created everything or we created everything. For the longest time, we've been creating everything together, and it wasn't until chattel slavery that people had to pick a side on who did what first, you know? But I would like to see that discussed more, yeah.
I hope you're taking notes because, yeah, can we get a round of applause for that? Because
I'm a nerd. I'm telling you.
Knowledge should be free. Look, a part of the reason why we do these things is because there's this massive belief that knowledge should be free, right? There's so much money being spent on knowledge, being asked for knowledge, and a lot of that time the knowledge we're being told is not true. So I think it's, we've got to acknowledge the knowledge that we receive and the new things that we learn and the new things that we hear. Does anybody else, maybe one more person? Yes, Brother Kobe D.
Peace.
Thank you. Yeah, I just want to kind of bring it back to one of the questions that was asked. We've being a family man, having kids, and being in the industry and touring and stuff like that. And you spoke about time privilege. For me, I feel that privilege as well, that I'm able to spend a lot of time at home with my kids, but also wanting to spend as much time as I can working because I'm at that point in my career, And I think for me, I grew up with an absent father, so now I'm a father of three. I have a stepson and a daughter and a son, and it's most important thing for me is to be as present in the household as I can. So I do the school drop-offs, I do the school pickups, I go to the studio in the times in between. But I kind of feel that guilt of working outside of that. Like even like next week I'm off to London and I'm doing I'll be there for 2 weeks, and it'll be the longest I've really been away from my family. And I guess my question is, does that impact your time that you put into work, and how does it impact your time with your family?
It's a good question. And hats off to you, man. We need more artists who showing that side. We family men,
Thank you.
Time management is key for me. Time management is key. How I work on projects are like in a step method. So when I'm working on a project, I'll start by producing it first. So when I go into the studio, I'm only producing. I don't do anything else. And then once I get a series of beats that sounds cohesive, I'll put them in an order, and I say, this is my next album. And then I will stop producing full stop, and then I'll just write. And when I write, I have a little bit more freedom because I don't like to be in the studio when I write because I'm too tempted to make beats. So I'll just walk around New York, go grocery shopping, run, play basketball, AirPods in the ears. I'm thinking the lines, I stop, I pause, I write something down. So I'll spend a lot more time outside when I'm in my writing phase. Once the writing's done, I stop writing and all I do is record. And I just do nothing but record until all tracks are done and I'm satisfied. When that's done, all I do is mix. And when the mixing is done, I don't listen to the record again unless it's time for rehearsal, and I'm just thinking of marketing. Compartmentalizing those things and working on them in the steps have allowed me to realize I don't actually need as much time as I think. And also I have formulas. So whenever I'm like down, I'm not as creative as I want to be, and I kind of force myself to say, this is a job, so whether I'm feeling it or not, go sit at that desk and make something happen. When there's nothing coming, I will just listen to samples for hours when I just have nothing. And I'm like, that's nice. And I'll just categorize it. That could be a classic boom bap track. Put that in the boom bap sample folder. Or this could be jazz fusion. Put that in the jazz fusion folder. Oh, that's definitely a pop one. Put that in a pop one. Ooh, this would be a good R&B sample. Put that in the R&B one. And then I'll stop doing that, and I'll be listening to drums. Ooh, those drums would go perfect for this. These drums would be perfect for that. And then I'll put it, and then I'll get this jolt of inspiration at some point. And at that point, the beat's already made almost because I'm just pulling this from this folder, pulling that from that folder, and putting it together. So I actually work faster even when I'm having writer's block or production block. So the key is to always work something that's constructive towards your end goal, no matter what it is. And you'll find that you have enough time to do it. And the end goal is a record, from its inception to its marketing to the merch. So at some point in time, I'm working on something. It could be the merch design for the t-shirts. It could be a rollout campaign. It could be photography for editorials or new press shots. It could be the sound production, the sound scape for the next record. It could be the theme for whatever the album's gonna be. At some point in time, I'm always working on it. So when I'm actually in the studio, I'm literally just following blueprints. If I showed you my phone right now, it'll say album ideas in the notes, song ideas, one-liners, collaboration ideas, marketing ideas. It's just all these different notes. I came up with one I was telling Sam on the plane here that I'm really excited about. I want to do this compilation where I showcase rappers from my home area. And the region where I'm from, they call it the Mid-Atlantic, from New York to North Carolina, because it's in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean on the East Coast. So I want to do this idea where I basically rip off the New Yorker's font of the New Yorker magazine, and they do these illustrations every issue. And I want to call it the Mid-Atlantic, and every issue would have whichever 5 artists are on this, 6 artists that are on this EP compilation that I'm doing, and I'm going to print this magazine in conjunction with every EP. And it'll be an interview of each artist with their lyrics, some stories about them, and when you buy this EP and you get this magazine, eventually one will sell the other. So I just log that as a note. So when I'm having a meeting with my distributor and they're like, so what are you coming out with? Oh, I got this great idea. Wow, that's really great. The rollout for that would be good. I'm like, oh yeah, and wait till you see the merch, right? And it's just something I just thought of on a plane. So just constantly giving yourself the ability to work on something that's constructive to your end goal. And you'll find that you'll have time to get it done. Yeah.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Can I say your bars, like, please just keep serving us good music. Take that advice and take us non-stop, timeless. Keep going.
Don't feel guilty though, Bo. No, don't. By the way, don't feel guilty.
Yeah, you're hectic.
Yeah, your kids will love you for it. You know, I won't see my kids for 2 months. You know, I had a conversation with my 6-year-old. She's like, I really don't want you to go. That's a really long time. Wait, how long is 2 months again? She doesn't even really comprehend it, right? And then I was like, you see all these other dads? They work 9 to 5s and they're home every day and they don't see their kids at all. That's why they have nannies and au pairs and these Trinidadian women who always pick them up, right? I said, but dad gets to pick you up every day. And you see how when we go to the playground, all these other kids are there with their nannies and their maids, and I'm the only one who's like actually here with you? Well, I get to do that because I have to go away for 2 months, right? So just break it, just be transparent with them and they'll love you for it, you know?
Yeah. I think it's it's a huge privilege that we've been able to do this, and that's a massive thank you to Black Music Alliance Australia for existing. Also to the Red Rattler Theatre, our Future Communities program, arts program. Tomorrow we're launching a fundraising campaign for the Red Rattler Theatre. For those of you who don't know the historics of the Red Rattler Theatre, please, I urge you to go out and check it out. This is a queer-run playground and it was started by 5 lesbian women who decided to buy this building for the purpose of creating free art and accessible arts for marginalized people who couldn't access spaces and express themselves. And since then, they've handed it over to the community. It's now fully community owned and run, which means we're paying a mortgage, which means in a few years' time, if we keep activating this space and keep having a reason for this space to exist, we won't have to worry about not existing anymore, because we all know a lot of spaces that we've all loved and grown up seeing around no longer exist because of things like what we see happening down the road, gentrification, and you know, these developers who are coming through, but, you know, we're too staunch over here. We'll never let that happen. So thank you, everyone, for coming through this evening and taking your time to be with us tonight. We really appreciate it. We really believe in free education, free knowledge, so we'll try and do more of these things. But in the meantime, please put your hands together again for Oddisee. And play some beats, Lachlan, give us some music.
I really loved hearing about all the history, actually, the cultural history, the musical history, political history. It was also really interesting to hear about Washington D.C. and how it was like its cultural divide and the history there. Honestly, too many things.
I think my favorite part was when he talked about his process of like isolating songwriting and then the producing side, the writing, and like I think I'm gonna try to implement that myself. So it's cool to hear his process kind of thing.
Oh my gosh, favorite moment. There were so many, but it was just great being in this space, hearing such an incredible conversation between Kween and Oddisee, 2 incredible artists, but just also the history, the culture, the knowledge that was dropped. And I could, listen to him for hours because he articulates himself so well between humour, but history and the incredible music that he makes. So thanks, Red Rattler and Black Music Alliance for putting it on.
It was so much fun. It's so good to have that new perspective, a fresh perspective from a different part of the world into the country, and just putting it to our own lives and our own community. community. So yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you.
I think it was super insightful, but also inspiring at the same time. And I think for us creators and artists, it gives more perspective and just a bit more direction, especially as a person of colour. And yeah, I really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
I'd have to say my favourite moment tonight was the African history lesson on civilizations and just truth-telling around that, which was amazing. Amazing. We need to hear more of that, I feel like.
He's like a full academic, hey? I was
Absolutely.
Like, yeah.
And I kind of wasn't expecting that, so I absolutely loved it.
I think that the thing that I really loved was just his perspective and grip on history and life. I think it was just really insightful. The history of go-go, just to give it that context. And it's just, I was just like, I remember thinking, I'm deep diving tomorrow. That's what I'm doing. I'm going to do deep dive and I'm going to just listen to all this music. I think any night where you leave feeling inspired to learn more and keep researching and find out more, and like it just there's so many seeds were planted. I think that was what was really important and worked for me tonight.
Yeah,